Thank you for joining us. This is Brave New History. We're here with Robbie Tulip. He works in the chaplaincy at the National University of Australia. Master's in existential ethics. Am I right so far?
Pretty close.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And maybe you can correct me where I went astray with that.
Okay, it's the Australian National University and ANU, and I also work with the Australian Student Christian Movement. So I have this interest in a critical approach to Christianity and religion more broadly, and that comes out of the master's thesis that I did many years ago now on ontology and ethics was the broad field, and as you say, that led to the theme of existential ethics.
Yeah.
So that's led me to, over the course of my life, just a interest in the relationship between philosophy and theology, and putting that into an astronomical framework through the precession of the equinox has been my research focus over many years.
Yeah. And so maybe for people that have looked into Mithraism, the precession of the equinox is a pretty big deal. And it's touched on, throughout, historical religions, or that might not exist today. And we might not be familiar with the precession of the equinox within Christianity. But yeah.
That's so true. And if you look at, as you say, Mithraism, that's the ancient religion that was based on the Persian cult of Mithra, but very popular in the Roman army. And they had their main symbol was known as the tauroctony, which is the symbol of the hero Perseus killing a bull. And there's a famous book, The Origin of the Mithraic Mysteries, by David Ulansey, published a couple of decades ago, that says that this symbol of the tauroctony symbolizes the transition from the age of Taurus, when the equinox was in the constellation of the bull, into the age of Aries, and that happened in around 2000 BC. And so there's this idea that ancient religion was intimately tied to astronomy, and so they saw the emergence of the social changes on Earth as in some way mirroring the changes that they saw in the sky. Now, what happened with Mithraism was that it was totally abolished by Christianity, and all of its literature was burnt. So we don't have very much explicit detail on the content of Mithraism. And even taking something like that precession idea, that's again really complicated, because if you look at the tauroctony, it focuses more on the celestial equator, the stars that go across the equator, rather than the path of the zodiac. Now that's starting to get into detail, but that's enough on Mithraism, perhaps.
Yeah. And now one thing I noticed, you didn't say the bull slaying scene, which I think a lot of people will say, like when they say, what's the tauroctony? Well, it's a bull slaying scene. Now, I think maybe in modern scholarship, they're saying the bull isn't being slayed, the leg is being cut off, or something along those lines. Is any familiarity with that? Or
I've never heard that theory.
Okay.
Like it certainly looks like the bull is being killed because he's sticking a dagger into its neck, so that's the only. But we really don't know the details, and this reflects, I think, a lot about the religion of the ancient world is lost, because what the Christians did was that they said, okay, we've got our Orthodox story that's in the Bible, and we're not going to tolerate anything that criticizes that. And if you happen to have any literature that criticizes our Orthodox gospel truth, then we'll kill you. That was the policy for 1,000 years, the view on heresy, and it's only really been with modern science that people have begun to have a more evidence-based approach to ancient religion, and that's where it becomes possible to start to analyze the evidence that we have and say, hey, what really happened with this story of Christian origins?
Yeah. So within, maybe we'll talk about Mithraism, which is maybe like a little bit less controversial at the precession of the equinox. And I'm really interested in Christianity and how that comes into play. And they seem to be borrowing heavily from each other, Mithraism. So, I mean, maybe we can lead into that. Or if there's
if you look at, for example, the bishop's hat known as the mitre, that's something that came straight from Mithraism that Christians took from the Mithraists. The Vatican was the headquarters of Mithraism before the rise of Christianity, and so the Christians basically, Mithraism was a really big deal before Christianity took it over, but then we've lost almost every trace of it.
Yeah. Which is interesting, being that it was once the official religion of the Roman Empire.
I'm not quite sure of that. No? There were a number of different religions. Like before Christianity was made the official religion, they had things like the cult of Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, very closely tied to Mithraism, and the ancient religions of Jupiter and Juno and Apollo and so on. So they were a lot more eclectic. They had a range of different religions before they decided that Christianity was the only one.
Gotcha. So yeah, maybe that's a misapprehension I have with Mithraism, that I thought it was synonymous with the cult of Sol Invictus.
Closely associated. I think there's a range of views there, but and some people would say synonymous. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. And so we said it's Perseus that's slaying the bull in the Troctony. Would you say that Perseus and Mithras are synonymous?
Look, that's going into the detail in a way that
Sure.
I wouldn't be confident to
Sure.
say. That's simply my understanding from books like Ulanzi's overview.
Gotcha. And so maybe, like, for anybody that's kind of fresh to Mithraism, that we have all these Mithraeum, which are temples that belong to the Mithraeans. And there's that central figure. There's some guy with I can't pronounce the word, Phrygian cap.
Phrygian, yeah.
Phrygian cap.
Phrygian hat.
Which is like the Smurfs wear, right?
That's exactly it, yep.
Yeah. And
there's actually lots of them. If you go to Rome and have a look at the Arch of Constantine, and of course Constantine was responsible for establishing Christendom, making Christianity first the accepted and then later the official religion. And there's a whole lot of Mithraic symbolism on the Arch of Constantine, including people wearing the Phrygian caps.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. And the Phrygian. Say it one more time. Sorry, Phrygian.
Phrygian.
Okay, so I'll remember it by like the refrigerator. You go to the Phrygian, and so the Phrygian cap was synonymous with a crown, or it has something to do with royalty. That you're a big deal if you wear it, right? And so Mithras is a big deal in this scene because he's wearing something quite like a crown. and he's stabbing the bull, and he's always look. He's got the bull right. You can't see my hands. He's got the bull, and he's looking up like
Yep.
at the sun deity, right? And yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Or probably it's just anybody's guess, really.
Look, it's just a beautiful symbol. It's
Yeah,
got the two guys on either side, one with his torch pointed upward, the other with his torch pointed down. There's a whole lot of I think cosmic symbolism
yeah,
within the Tauroctony. It's
yeah,
there's the animals of the stars, and the symbolism of the day and night and the sun and moon.
yeah,
It's this sense of cosmology is really quite prominent within the
yeah.
bull slaying scene.
Yeah, there's a raven flying around. There's a crab biting at the bull's privates, which probably symbolizes something. It's a recurring theme. I think there's a serpent there biting the bull's leg.
See,
Uh,
the crow and the snake, as I mentioned earlier, they're constellations of the celestial equator. It's usually seen to be a scorpion that's biting the bull's
Gotcha,
testicles,
gotcha.
and that reflects that during the age of Taurus, from 4000 to 2000 BC, the equinoxes, the spring equinox for the northern hemisphere was in the constellation of Taurus, and the autumn equinox that we're just coming up to right now was in the constellation of Scorpio, the Scorpion. So you had this cosmic axis of the bull and the scorpion, in the same way that today, in the age of Pisces over the last 2,000 years, that same cosmic axis of spring and autumn has been in the signs of the loaves and the fishes. So the loaves
Got it.
is the sign of Virgo, with its main star Spica as the spike of wheat, and the fishes, of course, is Pisces. So you've got the Virgin and the fish as the primary symbols of Christianity, in the same way that the bull and the scorpion were the primary symbols for the age of Taurus 4,000 years ago.
Gotcha. So that's maybe a good lead into Christianity, where we've got the bread, and we're eating bread as the body of Christ, and we have the miraculous drought of 153 fish in John, and the feeding of the loaves and fishes, right? And so, would you say that's a hint at uh, the progression of the equinox?
Look, it
No.
definitely is, and it's a really interesting story when you look into the loaves and fishes miracle of the cosmic abundance, the feeding of the multitude. If you look into that story, it's the miracle that appears most in the Bible. It's 6 times. There's 4 times the feeding of 5,000 and twice the feeding of 4,000, and it's full of all of these cosmic numbers, like 5 loaves plus 2 fish is quite similar to 5 visible planets plus the sun and the moon. There's 12 baskets that they put the food into, and that's like the 12 months of the year, or the 12 signs of the zodiac. There's the 2 stories of 5,000 men and 4,000 men, that plus all of their wives and kids. Now, the interesting thing is that there was quite a dispute in those days as to how many stars were visible. Some people thought that there were 5,000 visible stars. Some thought there were 4,000 visible stars. So my view is that the symbolism of the feeding of the multitude is completely cosmic. And what happens in that story is that Jesus says to his disciples, "Look, why don't you guys understand it? Why don't you get it?" And they just say, "Oh, it's too complicated. We can't." And he gets really frustrated. This is, I think, Mark 8. He gets really frustrated that they can't understand it. And to me, that's like a symbol of how this story of the astronomy, the precession of the equinox, It's underneath the text that we've got, but it was too complicated for most ordinary people to understand. And so you had these enlightened people who were like the Gnostics, and they understood the details of these stories. Then they tried to share it with the mass audience, and people were just scratching their heads. They couldn't work it out. And so you've got that sort of coming through in the Bible where Jesus says, look, okay, here we've got the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, and I've explained it to you, but you just didn't get it. And and so my view is that the explanation that he's given is all about how it's actually a parable. It's not a miracle at all. It's a parable for the underlying cosmic order that people could see in the precession of the equinox. They could see that the stars were slowly moving against the seasons, one sign every 2,000 years or so, and that this was this whole idea of like a new heaven and a new earth, or a new covenant, or the Alpha and the Omega. All of these basic symbols in Christianity, they become very clear when you put them into this framework of the ancient astronomy, where the astronomy was intimately linked to the religion. And the reason it was so linked was because they were a completely agrarian, agricultural society. In order to know when do you sow, when do you harvest, they looked at the stars. They said, okay, when this is like the Greeks would say, when the Pleiades, the beautiful jewel box constellation, the last day that you see that in the year, before it goes down in the evening, that's the day when you sow. And the first day when you see it, when it comes up in the morning, that's the day when you harvest. So those sorts of stories were just basic to the society. It just set their themes like Passover, Easter, Christmas, all of these things completely based on the stars. And we've lost so much of that that sense of cosmic order as the framework of religion. And it's something that we really need to get back into if we want to understand how the religion originally evolved, and what the meaning and intent of it was, in my view.
Yeah. So with the stories, like we have the feeding of the loaves and fishes, is there significance to being fed in it? Or I guess naturally that's what you do with wheat and fish.
Well, I would say that the significance of being fed is that it's a symbol of cosmic abundance. That if people are in tune with nature, then they can be prosperous and aligned to the cosmos. And so you can have if you're in tune with the cosmos, then that unlocks your creativity, and it's as much a spiritual creativity as a physical abundance. So the getting food from nothing, it's a symbol of the spiritual creativity that comes from a being in tune with the cosmos.
Gotcha.
And what was happening was that up until that time, for the 2,000 years before Jesus, like the Passover, at the same time as our Easter at the spring equinox, that had always happened when the sun was in the constellation of Aries. But now, when they were studying the heavens, they could see that the Passover was now happening with the sun in the constellation of Pisces. There had been a shift of the heavens. There was a new age. It was like there's been a shift of the structure of time, and so the old ideas, which were all based on the old age, the age of Aries, the Aries Libra axis, from the time of Moses. And of course, Moses has got all the Aries symbolism with the ram and the burning bush and so on. But it was like saying, okay, that old symbolism isn't working anymore. We need a new framework that's in tune with what's happened to the heavens now. So we come into this new era, new age of the fish. So so for the last 2,000 years, we've had the age of the fish and at the other side of the axis is the virgin, so the fish and the virgin or the loaves. And we're just coming to the end of that age now. We're now in a new transition from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius over the next 2,000 years, which is the meaning of that, popular song and imagery of the age of Aquarius. And so it's so interesting to me to look at how if you interpret the Bible against this cosmic framework, they could see, okay, well, it's been Aries for the last 2,000, it's going to be Pisces for the next 2,000, then it's going to be Aquarius. They could see this, and going back to like Adam as the start of the age of Taurus in 4,000 BC, this is the sort of framework that they had.
Yeah. So part of me wonders, how would they keep track? I mean, they didn't have, like, 2,000 years is a long time, and we're kind of without technology. It's hard to, how would they know that 2,000 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question, Elliot. And it's a very controversial one because we do not have explicit proof of it going back more than 150 years before Jesus. So the Greeks, an astronomer called Hipparchus, he looked at some old Babylonian star maps and he measured them against the stars that he could see. And he calculated that roughly this 2,000-year period was how long it would take for the equinox to go through one constellation. So he used observation of a lunar eclipse in about 140 BC to make that calculation. But the interesting thing is when you look at old Indian texts and from a range of places, the old Babylonian texts, there's this presence of the classic number was 2,160, and that's the more accurate estimate. The really accurate estimate is 2,147.5 years. That's how long it actually takes for the equinox to go through one sign. But traditionally, it was either 2,000, which makes like a 24,000 year period, and or 2,160, which makes close to a 26,000 year period. So there's these range of estimates, and you see these numbers appear quite mysteriously across a whole lot of ancient literature. And Joseph Campbell, Myths to Live By, he did quite a study of this work, and but it remains very controversial because we don't have, like the smoking gun, explicit proof, but there's just such an abundance of circumstantial evidence that it's the most plausible explanation. So, but in any case, for a century before Christ, they could see that it would take about 2,000 years for the equinox to move through the constellation of Pisces and then enter the constellation of Aquarius.
Yeah. And with that being the case, is there any correlation to Taurus in Christianity that we can make out?
Yeah. Well, I think the most classic one is when Moses says to the Jewish people, the Hebrew people coming out of Exodus, that they've been worshipping the golden calf, and they have to stop worshipping the golden calf. And he shows them, okay, God is revealed through the ram horn trumpet, and that he uses to Joshua then uses to knock down the walls of Jericho. And so there's this sense that the golden calf represents the old thinking, and the ram horn represents the new thinking. But then a really interesting one, the story of the cleansing of the temple in the Gospels, where Jesus overturns the tables of the money changers. Well, in the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, that comes at the start of Holy Week. But for St. John, it comes 3 years earlier at the start of his ministry. And what John says there is that the cleansing of the temple requires kicking out the cows and sheep. So we've got the cows, which represent the age of Taurus. We've got the sheep, which represent the age of Aries. And he says, in order to cleanse the temple, we have to get rid of these money changers together with all of their cows and sheep. Now, to me, that's like it's this symbolic language, a parable, like saying that the 5,000 men are a parable for the visible stars of the sky. It's like saying, okay, we know that the old religion was based on sheep for the last 2,000 years, and before that was based on cows. The age of Taurus. Aries.
Yeah, that seems very, very Gnostic almost, where we're talking about.
This is the thing. Sorry to jump in again, but this question of what is Gnosticism is one that I'm absolutely fascinated by, because the tradition from the Orthodox is that we started off with Jesus Christ, real person, crucified, resurrected, born from the Virgin, etc. And anyone who disagrees with that is a heretic. And then along came the Gnostics later and started up coming with all of this, changing this faith that we'd received. I have a completely different view. My view is that Gnosticism was the original teaching. It dated back centuries, thousands of years before Christianity. And it had close links to Plato, to the Republic idea of the philosopher king. It recognized that the stories were symbols, so that, for example, Jesus was the personification of the sun. And so the real Gnosticism, in my view, is actually in the Orthodox Gospels themselves. So when you take a book like the Gospel of John and say, okay, what does he mean when he says we're going to kick out the sheep and cows out of the temple? Then you take this Gnostic interpretation of it and say, okay, he's actually talking about astronomy. He's saying that we've got this grand and glorious cosmic order of grace, and we can see this gracious order that as above, so below, on earth as in heaven. It used to be the sheep. Before that, it was the cows. Now it's coming the age of the fish, and the loaves, and the age of the loaves and fishes. And so you've got this Gnostic symbolism that's within the Orthodox Bible itself, with a much clearer language than we see in a lot of the Gnostic texts, which are really pretty obscure. But where this becomes so interesting is in the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, because it is full of this processional imagery. You have something like the woman with the moon at her feet. Now, that's in Revelation 12. This great vision appears in the sky, and it's a woman with the moon at her feet. And if you look at the story of the Passover in Jerusalem, in about 4 BC, they had a blood moon on the day of the Passover. And when you've got a blood moon, which is a total lunar eclipse, you can see the exact position of the full moon against the background stars, and it's that when it's in eclipse, that it's exactly opposite the sun. So you know the exact moment when it's full just from visual observation, without any modern astronomy technology. And so when the moon went blood, it was at the foot of the woman. It was in the constellation of Virgo, at the foot of the woman, which meant that like Philo and Josephus, they said, okay, at Passover, the sun is always in Aries. But now, if the moon was in Virgo, that meant the sun was in Pisces, the opposite constellation to Virgo. So that's one example, but there's numerous other examples around the Holy City it's just full of this imagery, like the 12 jewels of the foundation of the holy city. The old tradition is that the first jewel symbolized Pisces, the second jewel symbolized Aquarius, and so on round the zodiac in reverse order. Now, and this is a city that's the shape of a cube, whose angles all add up to 2,160. And then you've got this whole series of procession imagery. But my favorite image in the Revelation is the Tree of Life, because the Tree of Life, it's very strange. Like when Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden of Eden, they were separated from the Tree of Life, which was in the Garden of Eden. And that's what they meant by the fall from grace. But then the redemption of the world is the restoration of contact with the Tree of Life. Now, it's a really weird tree because it grows on both sides of a river, and it's got 12 fruit, one for each month, for the healing of the nations is what it says. And so a normal tree does not grow on both sides of a river. The tree grows on one side of a river. So what's it mean? If you look up into the sky, then you see that the 12 signs of the zodiac are on both sides of the Milky Way. So you've got the river of life as the Milky Way, and you've got the tree of life as the stars of the zodiac. So what it's saying is that God is revealed in nature. It's quite a pantheistic sort of origin. But because the church was so hostile to that idea, because it said, God is totally transcends nature, they said, look, we're not having any of this stuff, and anything that's got that sort of language is just banned as heresy. And so that sort of language, it only survived in a heavily coded form. And that's why we don't have the explicit evidence that we would like to see, because if there was anything explicit, like monks were under instruction, if you've got something that contradicts the faith, then get rid of it. And that was the rule for more than 1,000 years. So they did. They got rid of it. Like, the only Gnostic texts practically that survived were in jars in the desert sand at the very bottom of the River Nile. It was very difficult for this material to survive. So we have to take a forensic approach to what we do have and say, okay, what we've got is just a small fraction of what they really thought. How can we reconstruct what they really did think? What was the astronomy? What was the cosmology that created the evidence that we've got? Why do they say Jesus was the Alpha and Omega when that exactly correlates to the shift of the equinox point from the constellation of Aries, the first sign, into the constellation of Pisces, the last sign? So you've got all of these correlations that suggest a really strong cosmic procession motif. Revelation 15, it says Jesus is the King of Ages. And so there's this abundant processional imagery within the New Testament that sheds new light on its real meaning.
Yeah. Now, I wonder, with the central symbols within Christianity, Christ on the cross, right? I've heard, that's the axis mundi. Mm-hmm. Is there anything astrological in there?
Absolutely. Look, this raises the cosmology in a really interesting way. One thing that I find fascinating is the comparison between Christianity and Indian mythology. And within the Indian mythology, they've got this theory of a 24,000 year cycle of light and dark. Now, the public version, it's called the Yuga. And the public version is that the Yugas last for billions of years. But the ancient tradition says, okay, really the cycle is a 24,000 year cycle, which is very close to this precession cycle of 26,000 years. Now, what they say is that the bottom point of this cycle is around about the time of Christ, and that's the Iron Age, the Kali Yuga. and the high point of the cycle is 12,000 years earlier. And so you've got this image of the crucifixion as this moment of darkness, that you've got a cosmic cycle, and at the bottom of the cycle is the time of Christ, and then there's a gradual ascent out of the darkness towards a time of new light. And this, it actually has an exact correlation with the astronomy. That is, the cycle of ice ages also run on this 24,000 year cycle. And so within the story of the death and resurrection of Christ, you've got this symbolism of the cycle of light and dark, and that applies at the level of the day, at the level of the year, and then also at this much longer time frame of the precession of the equinox. So it's those three cycles form the cycle of the Earth.
Gotcha. So we'll say Christ dying, that's the bottom of the
Yep.
yuga.
That's right. Yes.
Right? And then resurrection is the top of the circle.
The way I would explain that is, I would say that the Gnostics were in contact with people from across the world: Buddhism, Hinduism, Babylonian and Egyptian and Greek religions, and so they had this vision of a 12,000 year descent from the Golden Age to the Iron Age. Now that appears in the Bible, in Nebuchadnezzar with his feet of clay and his head of gold. And then it appears also in Greece with Hesiod says, we've been on this long descent from the Golden Age to the Iron Age, Ovid in Rome. And so you've got this, that's the descending half of the cycle. The Indians then said, okay, when we reach the bottom, then we start to go up again, up towards a new Golden Age. And the imagination of Christ was to say, okay, we've got the spirit of the Golden Age, that is the spirit of enlightenment and knowledge, in the midst of the Iron Age, the age of darkness and ignorance. So that's why the age of darkness and ignorance, the Kali Yuga, can't kill off the spirit of the Golden Age, because it's like saying, can the night kill the day? No, we know the day is going to come back again. So you've got this symbolism of natural cycles that explains Jesus as a sun god, as a personification of the sun in its daily, annual, and slow processional cycles.
Got it. So it's maybe commentary on natural cycles. Maybe it's the progression of the equinoxes. Maybe it's like night and day and whatnot, that it's...
That's exactly right. So Copernicus, he said the Earth's got three cycles. It's got the cycle of the day, it's got the cycle of the year, and it's got the cycle of the precession. And that was exactly right. Now we've refined that a little bit with modern astronomy, but that's the basic structure of time for our planet.
Gotcha. And would you put any significance on, say, the cross?
It's such a fascinating symbol. So I think the idea of the four corners of the cross. Now you'd probably be aware of the symbols of the four evangelists. So we've got the bull, the lion, the man, and the eagle. Now they appear in Daniel, in Revelation, in lots of Christian symbolism, and so you've got this sense of a cross in the heavens, because those four symbols they match directly to Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Aquarius the man, then you've got this really interesting thing that Scorpio is a scorpion, but it used to be an eagle. And it was, for some reason, it was changed from an eagle to a scorpion. So you've got the 4 living creatures, as they're called. They form the cross in the heavens, and there are four stars which mark this cross. And I think that the theology of the cross is something that's very profound and deep in many dimensions, at a social dimension, about, why is it that we call it Good Friday when it was such a bad thing? Like, if you've got some guy who comes along who's the Messiah, who's the incarnation of God, and you just nail him to a plank of wood, like, it's very disrespectful. But then the people who follow him say, "Fantastic! We're so pleased that he got nailed to that plank. Isn't that great? Isn't that exactly what we'd do if a new Messiah came along?" It's pretty crazy, really. Like, it's so you've got this sort of paradox within Christianity, that people see the cross as the symbol of salvation, when really the cross is a symbol of how deeply alienated we are from the truth. So if Jesus represents the truth, he says the truth will set you free. He says he tells Pilate what is truth, and then Pilate says, "Okay, I'll show you truth. Here's the nails." Explore, and I think that this leads into a further really interesting topic, and that is, well, is it, or did Jesus actually exist? Is it fact or fiction? My view is that it's all fiction. My view is that it was the symbolism of the Gospels was developed in secret mystery societies for hundreds of years before the time. They had all of these stories going around by oral transmission, just from mouth to ear, nothing written down. And then in the time of Mark, it came to writing down the story of Jesus of Nazareth. And the stories that we have, they're just like the introduction. It's like what Jesus says in the Gospels is, everything I tell the public is a parable, and I reserve the truth for the initiates. So that means that we're instructed to read the Gospels as parables. And so his passion, his death and resurrection, it's all a parable for some deeper truth. And the deeper truth, as I think we've discovered in modern times, is found through science, through scientific knowledge of nature and astronomy. And so we're asked to look back and say, what was their astronomy? What was the deeper truth that they were pointing to in saying that Jesus symbolized this deeper truth with his cross and resurrection?
Yeah, that's really profound. There's a lot going on there, where we're going through the symbols and kind of the parables, and there's not like a historical figure there, where it's just, that's kind of what I wonder, right? Where we can look at the catch of fish. Well, that was Plato, right? And we keep on going, and the whole, I talk in parables, so they're not going to understand me, like, or in order that they don't understand me, right? Which is, I've always wondered, like, why would you talk if you don't want people to understand you, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And just, the whole shebang is symbolism, is an interesting idea, right?
Okay, I'll go on to that. Why would you talk in a way that the general public can't understand? There's a really great book that helped me to understand this a lot, which is called The Memory Code. And it's a study of the religion of pre-literate societies. And we have to remember that writing only came into prominence around the time of Christ. Like there was writing before then, but hardly anybody could use it, and the bulk of culture was completely oral, and they had fantastic feats of memory. All of their mythology was handed on by memory. Nothing was written down. And the way they did it was they had initiated elders, and they would sit together in a bunch and they would recite their myths. And if anyone made a mistake, then they'd get pulled up, because they wanted to make sure that they kept their myths exactly accurate the way they'd been handed down. Now, this is a pattern that anthropology has found in societies from Aboriginal Australia to Ireland to across the world. It's something that's just universal, that pre-literate oral societies used this. And what they did was they said, okay, we don't want the general public to be messing with our myths by getting wrong versions of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to have super simple versions for our kids, and we're going to introduce them to the mythology with a really simple literal story, you know, something like Noah's Ark, and we're going to say, okay, this is our religion. And once they get initiated, once they're adults, we're going to say to them, okay, you heard all that stuff. Well, here's what it really means. So you've got this pattern of saying that religion was too important to be allowed to be divulged to the general public. So only a simplified version, as Jesus says, you know, he talks to the public in parables, and he keeps the real secret. He calls them the secrets of the kingdom. He keeps the secrets of the kingdom for the initiates. But then what happened was that along comes the Roman Empire. They're armed with not only the sword but also the pen, and the combination of the sword and the pen is much more powerful than we've got the old saying that the pen is mightier than the sword. But when you've got the pen and the sword against the tongue, as against oral transmission, it's very easy to destroy an oral tradition. You just kill everyone, and it's gone. And like this is what's happened with so many indigenous societies. The colonizers said, okay, we're going to completely smash your tradition. We're going to ban you from speaking your language. And now, people are in grief because their heritage has been destroyed.
Yeah. So along the lines of why it's kept secret, it's because how could we break it down? Like, I'm not sure I understand like the practicality of a secret tradition.
Well, it's because it's sacred. So the words sacred and secret are intimately tied, and so you've got the elders who are the custodians of the sacred secret tradition of the community, and their moral focus is ensuring that the tradition never changes. And so in order for it not to change, they can't have multiple versions going around. So if they spill the beans and tell people who are not authorized to know their secrets, then those people are going to start getting new versions of it, and it's going to be corrupted. And so it's actually a universal syndrome in anthropology. That's whether it's India, all the pre-literate communities have had this practice of initiation, and the initiation is into the secret mysteries of the society.
Gotcha. And so when we get into Rome, are you saying that Rome had something to do with the writing of the Gospels and making variant traditions?
The way I would put it would be to say I view it in a sort of metaphysical sense of the East is good and the West is bad. In that the Romans came along with I mean, they're the origins of fascism. You know, the fasces that Mussolini had were based on the symbols of ancient Rome, and they were incredibly violent. You know, the scale of crucifixion that they applied, like Josephus said in the Jewish War, they kept crucifying Jews until they ran out of wood. And so the scale of violence in the Roman Empire was such that the conquered peoples had very little that they could do to fight back. And so I see the construction of the Gospels as a way of fighting back against Rome. But then, of course, the power of Rome meant that Rome co-opted the Gospels and took over, and they reinterpreted it all, and they got rid of the bits that that undermined their authority, and shifted it from a messianic transformative a message of liberation into the Christendom model of the union of throne and altar, the union of church and state, with Christianity as a supporter for the stability of the current politics.
Interesting. So it was essentially co-opted, and you would think that the earlier versions were not favorable to Rome.
That's right. Yes. So, although I think that this is one of it's quite speculative, but there was this sense that they could see, like if they said, okay, we're now at the bottom of this 24,000 year cycle, it's going to take 2,000 years before this message will even be understood. And that's what Jesus says in Matthew 24. He says, it won't be until the end of the age, when the gospel is preached to the whole inhabited earth, that the kingdom will come and this message will be understood. And so you've got, it's like they're playing a very long game. It's like they could see that taking on Rome with Rome's own weapons of the sword, you know, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. And I know there's a bit of ambiguity, and there are other texts that contradict this line that I'm describing, but it's like they were saying, we're going to take 2,000 years before this the ethical message that we're presenting here will start to make sense to people as something that's practical.
Interesting. So what do you think they were thinking? So the early Christians kind of had their sights set far into the future with it, like after Rome is destroyed.
Yeah, they were saying, okay, how can we understand this collapse that we've had? You know, we've had this Iron Age, like a literal Iron Age of the emergence of iron technology over bronze technology, which has just unleashed such a scale of violence in the world that the idea of restoring a sense of enlightened wisdom will be a really slow process. So that's why you've got this the classic model of fall and redemption is that the fall from grace occurred in 4000 BC, and what happened then, like the way I look at that is I look at it against this precession of the equinox theme. And what happened then was there's this point in our orbit, which is called the perihelion. I'm sorry, I'm introducing a new topic here, which is the underlying astronomy. Now, the perihelion is the point in our orbit where we're closest to the sun. And in 4000 BC, the perihelion moved out of summer and into autumn. It crossed the September equinox. And the perihelion is now in January. It advances by 1 day every 58 years. And so it's like the underlying physical driver of this 24,000 year cycle. It's a climate cycle which runs the glaciation, the advance and retreat of glaciers, the rise and fall of the sea, follows this cycle. So if there was a if people had contact, for example, in India, over tens of thousands of years of watching the glaciers advance and retreat, then it's conceivable that there was deep memory of this sort of shift. So there's this sense that people were thinking at this millennial timescale, but then putting it into the Christian framework, we've got this 7,000 year theory of history. And that's the theory that there would be, but like when Peter says, when that 1,000 years is as a day for God. So God says that there'll be 7 days of creation, there'll be 6 days of work, and 1 day of rest. And on that model, the ancient church said, okay, we'll have 6,000 years of fall, followed by 1,000 years of redemption. And so you've got this ancient model that said, that really did think in this sort of millennial time horizon. They could see that the powers of the world, the archons of this age, were too powerful for them to confront directly. So all they could do was like construct an alternative vision of time that was playing a very long game.
Yeah, and along those views, like the archons of this age, fall and redemption, that if we look at Gnosticism, I've kind of noticed a similar thing where we're always falling, right? So with the monad, we could look at it as a fall with the emanations, right? It's really good, like the eons, right? They're really good, but not quite the monad, right? And then we keep going, we get the demiurge, right? So that's a fall, right?
Yeah.
And then if you're, more of a mainstream Christian and you look at Revelation and you look at the fall in heaven, which a lot of people interpret the stars to be angels, right? The third of the stars in the sky fell. I'm not sure it says angels, but that's mainstream, right? Where you have the fall of the angels in heaven. And then we get to earth, right? And this is the fall that everybody thinks, eating from the tree of knowledge, right? And then we've fallen from grace. But it's kind of like every step of the way, you're seeing this fall, right? And the Gnostics will say, well, and then we need to go back, right? Except that's a little piece that's missing, isn't it? Like, there's not really a narrative that gets us back up there.
Well, this is what we find in the Indian Yuga concept. It says that when you reach the bottom of the fall, that's when you start your moment of ascent. It's like the December solstice, the shortest day, is celebrated 3 days later with Christmas, because it's the return of the light. That the moment of greatest darkness is when the light begins to return. So you've got this. What's so interesting is that the Western traditions were very linear. They saw time as, starting with creation and leading to a redemption, whereas the Eastern traditions were cyclic, and they had this view of when you've got a golden age, it's followed by an iron age, followed by a new golden age, just like you've got winter followed by summer every year. It's cosmic seasons, similar to our annual seasons.
Gotcha. And maybe the tradition wasn't there within Gnosticism to kind of get us some kind of narrative to ascend back up.
I think of a lot of the Gnostic material that I've read as not particularly informative. I prefer to say that the deep traditions are found in the Orthodox texts, and they're concealed within the Orthodox texts. And then the Gnostics were sort of trying to copy it with a sort of fake wisdom, but it's like they came at a time when Rome had so dominated the world that they were sort of clutching at straws a bit. So I haven't really found that much in the Gnostic texts that really supports this sort of underlying procession cosmology. Like they talk about ages, but they don't expand on it in the same way that a book like the Revelation does, where you've got this really profound vision. So I prefer to go back to the Gospels and the Revelation as sources. And there's also some material in the Old Testament, but primarily the Gospels is the focus that I think is most important.
Yeah, that's interesting. The real Gnostic texts as the Orthodox one.
Yep.
You wonder that. Yeah, that's never crossed my mind before. Where, would you say it's all astrological, or are there other inputs to it as well, or is it's fundamentally astrological, the Gospels?
Well, it depends what you mean by the relationship between astrology and astronomy. Like, I think that astrology as a tradition is really quite complicated because it's. I love astrology. I think it's really beautiful, and there's a lot of profound wisdom, but there's also such a lot of just really superficial folk traditions that don't make a lot of sense, and so to me it's more a matter of saying you've got a framework of astronomy, and that so there was a great astronomer, Milankovitch. He came up with this theory of ice ages in the 1920s, and which he said it's based on the precession of the equinox, as together with some other orbital cycles. And so what I've done is I've explored the ancient religion against that modern astronomical framework, and say, so you've got this underlying real cycle, and there was like an intuition of that real cycle within the evolution of culture, and so then the astrology is like a way of putting a symbolic language on top of that. So you've got something like the fish, where people imagined they saw fishes in the constellation of Pisces. Now, there's not really anything necessarily fishy, to use that word, about Pisces, but it constructs a sort of cultural symbol that helps us to understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, along those same lines is something like in the back of my mind, as we've been talking, not even maybe in the back of my mind, I've kind of mentioned it a few times, the catch of 153 fish.
Yep.
Would you put anything astrological? I know, there's the first proposition of Euclid, right? But would you put anything astrological?
It comes from Archimedes, and so Archimedes said that I'll get this straight because it goes into some mathematics. The square root of 2 equals 265 over 153 to the closest whole number approximation, and the square root of 2 is the number that appears in the Christian ichthus fish symbol. Mm-hmm. So what you've got with the I can probably find a drawing of it, but there's what you've got with the number 153 is that it's an esoteric number in sacred geometry, which is based on this Archimedes fish symbol, which is also called the mandorla. So when you've got here, so I've got two circles, and each one of them, like the center of this one is, sorry, the edge of this one is at the center of this one, and then the shape that's formed by the intersection that has got the number 153. The ratio between the height and the width of that geometric shape is 265 over 153. So that's the geometry of it, and so it's like the authors were influenced by traditions from everywhere, from Greece, as you mentioned, Euclid, from Egypt, from Buddhists as well, from Babylon, and so saying 153, it was like a signal to this secret tradition of sacred geometry.
Yeah, and it does form a cross, doesn't it? The 265 and the 153. Where it's the height and the width. I mean, that's not too terribly profound, because I mean,
it's a cross. It's not the same, like, because the Christian cross has got the crossbar elevated, whereas that cross, it's right in the middle. Yeah, but you're right. It's the cross.
Yeah, and I've thought about the number 153, and so I've noticed.
Of course, for people who might not be familiar with this, this is the story where Jesus is going fishing with the disciples, and they don't catch anything. And he says, "Oh, have a look on the other side of the boat." And they have a look on the other side of the boat, and they pull up their nets with 153 fish in them.
Yeah, which has always been kind of interesting, because John doesn't really mention a whole lot of numbers. He says a great many, a few, several, some, right? But doesn't give numbers. But with how many fish are caught, he gives a very exact number. Well, I guess all numbers are exact, but it's a surprising number.
Sure. There is so much in John that bears fruitful analysis against this sort of Gnostic suggestion that there is a secret meaning. So there's a whole lot of connection with ancient Egyptian mythology. There's connection with the Babylonian. I mentioned before this idea that kicking out the sheep and cows from the temple with the money changers was a symbol of procession. Numerous other processional symbols. So this is where I find it more advantageous to analyze the Orthodox texts and say, what is the most plausible secret meaning that they hold?
Yeah, absolutely. So here, would we want to go into answering a few questions, if that works?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Well, I mean, that's all we've been doing, but I mean, from the viewers. I mean, not to say that we haven't, but let's see. Here we have some comments. Here we have Lucius Charinus. Fascinating subject. Thanks. And then some comments back when we were talking about the Gnostics, New Plato. Here's a comment on Roman provenance. All in Judea, it is the centurion who has the greatest faith. Yeah, that does sound something like what the Romans would want us to hear. Let's see. Ralph Ellis. Are you familiar with Ralph Ellis by chance?
I'm also familiar with Lucius. He's a friend of mine called Peter Brown.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a friend of yours.
Sure. Assuming that's the same Lucius. But Ralph Ellis. I'm friends with Ralph. I quite like his science article on albedo. I quoted that in one of my recent papers. And
interesting.
Ralph is an interesting guy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Render unto Caesar. All right, and here's Lauren. She's
Also from
you know,
Australia.
yeah.
I think Lucius is also from Australia, which is nice.
Wow, very, very good. Okay, so she has this question here. Let's see. The original, or no,
Aboriginal
Aboriginal myth.
of Biome.
Yeah, he's a hunter. He's the hunter Orion, depicted in the southern skies, and in the myth as falling over. How do you think these disparate cultures saw a hunter in those stars? That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I am not familiar with that story. So Biame is the Indigenous Australian sky father, and so you've got many cultures that have this tradition of the sky father and the earth mother. Of course, Christianity's got rid of the earth mother, but the I wasn't familiar with Orion as personifying Biome, and there's some absolutely beautiful Aboriginal stories. We have the Seven Sisters is one of the big Aboriginal myths, where the Pleiades, the jewel box that we mentioned earlier, used to be 7 visible stars and now 6, and so many cultures around the world have shifted, still have this, and they have the story of Canopus, which is the second brightest star in the sky, which you of course can't see it from where you are in Minneapolis because it's too far south, and so they have a big story about Canopus as the man who tries to seduce the Seven Sisters, but how did disparate cultures see a hunter in Orion? That's a great question, and that's all I can say about it.
Yeah, you wonder. Yeah. And yeah, that's a good question. All right. And let's see. Indian ascetic mystic teacher from 500 BC shares the same nativity as Jesus. His parents could find somewhere for him to be born, but they found a barn. Gosala means cowshed. Is this motif in the stars?
What I'd like to pick up on that is the connection between Christianity and Buddhism, because it's really not very well known, and the Buddhist emperor of India, Ashoka, sent missionaries to the Mediterranean in about 250 BC. And those Buddhist missionaries, it appears, brought the tradition of monasticism. So there's no monasticism in the West until it was brought from India. And so with monasticism came the whole scholastic tradition of the monastery. And they established a monastery in Egypt at Lake Mareotis, the monastery of the Therapeutes. And it's widely, so Philo identifies the Lake Mareotis monastery with the Jews, but a lot of the language really does suggest that it was a syncretic institution with a very strong Buddhist influence. So then, when you start to look at stories like the Sermon on the Mount, there's a really powerful Buddhist Indian influence. Now, I've mentioned how the Yuga cycle of 24,000 years provides an encompassing framework for the Christian theory of the 7,000-year linear theory of time. And it illustrates the strength of the Indian influence. But I actually, one symbol that I find helpful is to say that the angel with the flaming sword who blocked the way to the Garden of Eden is like setting up a barrier between Judaism and India. But that this barrier was somewhat broken by the conquests of Alexander the Great, and that the old trade connections between India and the West became much more prominent, and that stories like this one of saying, why is it that so much Christian mythology, like the Nativity story, has got parallels in India. There are also parallels in Egypt. There's so much of the mimetic evolution of mythology that we can see, where people are well familiar with how the Noah's Ark story evolved from the Epic of Gilgamesh out of Babylon. And but these stories, why is it, for example, that Abraham, Sarah, and Haggai match directly to Brahma, the Sarasvati River, and Gaga? There's these connections. It's all part of the one language family as well, the Indo-European linguistic family. So it was much more possible for people in the Mediterranean world to learn the language of India, and I think that there was a lot more interaction than we now realize, because the suppression was so strong. And this is, I think, a really key theme in the history, that the Christian church was instructed by the Roman Empire to, like what the Roman Empire said is, we all need to believe the same thing as a matter of imperial stability and security, so we have to abolish everything else. And that then led to the whole period of Christendom was a real dumbing down and an impoverishment of spiritual wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. And now, let's see. Maybe we'll say one last call for questions. And is there anything that we didn't touch on, or anything that you would want to expand on before we head out?
Let me think. Look, there probably should be. We've covered a lot of territory, and I'm really pleased, Elliot, to have been able to chat with you, because it's material that I've been studying for a very long time. It's I think to me what this material suggests is a way to reconstruct Christianity in a way that's positive, because the problem that we have with Christianity today is that it's got a very bad reputation, because it's seen essentially as a right-wing fantasy. And so the idea that we can extract a positive ethical cosmology out of the Bible that has a relevant message for the ethical transformation of the world today is something that I think is socially really important. And we see themes like liberation theology, where the whole idea of Christianity as aiming to transform the world and not to escape from the world, which I think is so often the sort of syndrome that you see in fundamentalist religion. And so, like, I think especially for you in the United States, you've really got this major problem with conservative Christianity as a doctrine that is just broadly held in contempt by rational people because of its how it's been corrupted by politics. And so, we've got these massive world problems of climate change, especially, which is the other really big interest that I have that we haven't touched on. We obviously won't have time to go into that, but it's like Christianity is saying, we'll give you a fantasy that you can believe instead of science, and that's quite unethical. We really need to look at Christianity in a scientific framework and say, how can the moral messages within Christianity around social transformation be rehabilitated, be restored, be reformed, to integrate faith and reason, to integrate science and religion, and build on our heritage rather than tossing it out. I think a lot of a lot of atheists, they come across this material and they say, well, it's all junk, let's get rid of it. And
Mhm.
that's not a view that I share, because I think that there is great wisdom in this material, which can be built upon as a way of understanding how we can reform our society today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly, with people wanting to get rid of, the Bible or Christianity. I mean, if the takeaway from the Bible is like, well, to heck with the earth and climate change, and gay people are bad and who knows what, well, then it is garbage, right? But then is that really what it's saying? Is that the words on the page, right? Like, it's almost like, in the United States we have the evangelical movement, and it seems a bit antithetical, doesn't it, to the gospels,
It
right?
is.
Where
That's the extraordinary thing, that they say
yeah.
that they're Bible believers, but they really ignore the Bible when it comes down to it, because the Bible is a message. It's a messianic call for social transformation, and that's not at all what the conservative evangelical movement sees in the Bible. They see it as a defense. Like when you go back to the Ten Commandments, and they say, well, the most important thing coming out of the Ten Commandments is that to be a real person, you have to be a man who owns property. And the other thing, the most important commandment, is not to covet your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's slaves. And so if you've got that sort of authoritarian, hierarchical, monotheist, patriarchal social framework, then you can just sort of pull out of the Bible whatever bits and pieces will support that preconceived ideology, and ignore all the rest.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, it seems to me, of course, I'm in the United States and we see a lot of this. I'm not going to name any particular past president of the United States, but we see a lot of this. Oh, yeah, I believe in the Bible, but I don't think you're vaguely familiar with it, right? That, I mean, I was talking to somebody, and they had mentioned that they get their morality 100% from the Bible, that they live by the 10 commandments, right?
Yeah.
And I say, oh, okay. Like, can you name me the sixth commandment? And she was saying, is that murder? Which one is that? And of course my response, I have no idea. Like, I don't, like, that doesn't drive my life, right? But like, I think it's a lie. Like, if you ask what's your husband's phone number, she would know it, right? Because it's useful on a day-to-day level. But if you can't name for me what's the seventh commandment, you don't really live by it. But it's something we tell ourselves, right? But
It's more a symbol of tribal identity. It's
yeah.
saying, I identify as a conservative Christian, and that's my social community, and so it's. I'll tell you a funny story about the Ten Commandments. There was
Mhm.
the first set that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, but they busted. He had the
Yeah.
two tablets. And so Moses had to go back for a second set of 10 commandments. And it's this second set, Exodus 34, that the Bible actually calls the 10
Yeah.
commandments. And I can tell you what the first commandment is, and that is, smash the religion of the goddess worshippers. So what you've got there is this sense that before the Ten Commandments, you had a religion of male and female equality. And then along came the Ten Commandments, and they said, okay, in order to have military security, we can't afford all of this goddess worship stuff. We have to smash it. And so the first commandment in the second set of the Ten Commandments was break down the groves of the Asherah worshippers, the goddess worshippers, and it's something that's it's quite a degraded sort of theology in my view of it.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean that story with receiving the Ten Commandments, I've been always been confused at. Like the first set is completely different. There's I think that's where we get don't uh, cook a baby calf in its mother's milk is one of
Yep.
them.
Yeah.
And there's give your
Right.
first harvest to God. That's one of them. But they don't seem moral really. It just seems like weird things to do, right? And I mean, at least the next set, I mean, there's you can see a bit of morality in it, right? Whereas, like, I am the Lord your God that delivered you out of the house of bondage. That's more of a statement than a command. Like, there's no real imperative there, but that's one of the commandments. Um, well, and actually, there's clearly more than 10. Like, you can't walk away from saying that there's 10 commandments there because there's a good 15, but they're never delineated. And then the first set, they're trying to say that the second set is identical when they're nowhere near alike. And this is the most treasured thing, right, that God has ever given man. And the first thing he does out of the mountain is smash it to bits, right? Why would you do like, I don't know. Maybe there's something going on that I'm not seeing symbolically, but yeah, I thought
Sure.
that's a weird story.
Yeah, I think a big part of the symbolism is the emergence of patriarchal monotheism and a hierarchical approach to religion. And whereas before there'd been a much more of a sense of equality, and now people are saying we can't afford equality because we have to have military defense.
Yeah, yeah. I'm inclined to say that. I was interviewing Edward Dodge a lot on having to do with swoon theory, right? The idea that Christ's death was fake, and we kind of got into that where, yeah, kind of the militarism, where it's kind of my view that first comes the militarism, first comes hard times, and then it comes, men being in charge. It's not men being in charge and then war, right? Where it's
Hmm.
kind of like, well, we need to protect the women at all costs because they create the next generation, right? Where you only need one man to bring the whole tribe to the next generation, right? And so things, I mean, as war does, messes things up, you know. But
That's right.
certainly. All right, and here maybe we'll do one last question. I mean, we've been at it for an hour and a half, so maybe uh, wind down. Or is that all right? Maybe one more.
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I don't want to just keep on going forever. Well, actually, I do. That's a lie. I do, but we can't. Um, let's see. I've seen you mention Mayan myth of the five suns somewhere. Have you creamed the
Seen.
Mayan
I think
scene?
yeah.
Yeah, I knew that wasn't the right verb here, but I don't know. Maybe it's over my head. I don't know. The Mayan creation myth, the Popol Vuh. So many parallels. I assume astrological.
Well, I will comment on the Mayan mythology of um, the the end of time. You'd recall that in December 2012, the theory was that the Baktun cycle of Mayan myth came to a completion. And so I was able to travel to Yucatan at that time, which was great fun. It was just very interesting. But I did find that the um, the culture surrounding that whole story was like that. The whole New Age culture is one that's a little bit airy, and so I try to look at these things in a more of a scholarly perspective. And so I did find that a lot of the Mayan material it didn't really have that much scholarly to say. It was interesting that they've got a 20-year theory of time, and that exactly matches the cycle of Jupiter and Saturn as the most distant planets. They come together every 20 years, and it's interesting to see how that appears out of the Mayan traditions. But really, with the Popol Vuh, the Mayan text, most of the Mayan texts were burnt by the Spaniards, and so we've only got quite a limited knowledge of what the Mayans really believed.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, and she was saying, oh, she has a 3-year-old. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's why she cream instead of seed. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again. Maybe make this a 50-part series, right? And
really appreciate it, Elliot. Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. I loved it, and it's probably among our most, information thick, interviews that we had. Just yeah.
Oh, that's great. Well, there's a lot more that we can delve into in greater depth. So really appreciate chatting. Thanks very much.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you everybody for watching, and everybody that made it till the end. Thank you so much. And yeah, have an awesome day, everybody. And
okay. Bye-bye.